Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Moon Lodge Mingle. My name is Bee, and I am the owner of Moon Lodge Mystic. I use tarot and Vedic astrology to do depth work with people who are seeking guidance on addressing the challenges of living and having an authentic lifestyle in our material world. Last episode, I gave an overview about shadow work, what it is, what is the shadow, and how to do shadow work. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about light workers and shadow workers. I'm a shadow worker. I call myself a depth worker because I think that's the more accessible term for what I use. A lot of people are scared if you talk about shadow work or they've never heard about it. I'm not sure that everybody's heard of depth work either, but I like it. I think depth work really just captures the art of what I'm doing with my intuitive talents. And shadow working is definitely within that realm and tends to be my bread and butter. That being said, I came into metaphysical spaces learning about metaphysics and spiritual modalities, and light work light worker is a phrase that gets tossed around a lot. My experience of the term is we have light worker and shadow worker, but nobody's using the term shadow worker, but everybody's using the term light worker because we want to make people feel at ease when they come to us for really deep healing work. Light workers tend to advertise themselves as being aligned with angel consciousness, focusing on elevation and working with the light. And then there are the people who feel that light work is kind of overhyped, and those are probably usually the shadow workers, because light worker kind of tends to get mocked for its mocking. They get mocked for being all love and light and super positivity, up the yin yang. And people tend to kind of like shrug it off or not take it very seriously because it just kind of comes across as goody two shoes type thinking. But I wanted to actually redeem light work in a way, because I think that we tend to get lost in that stereotypical portrayal of light workers and not really think about the holistic need for light work in our lives. So here's my take on light workers and shadow. In the previous episode, I was describing the model of the psyche through Jungian theory, and there's the whole psyche, which is represented by a circle. And then through the circle, there's a horizontal line that represents the threshold of awareness. This is contents within the psyche have to breach through this line essentially to enter our conscious awareness. And most of the contents of our psyche lie below this line in our unconscious awareness. So we're not conscious of it. It's shocking to us, or it's stuff that's just outside of our direct conscious control. You can control your breathing. If you focus on it, you can control your breathing. But if you're not focused on it, suddenly you're breathing automatically. It becomes an unconscious process. There's so many bodily processes that are like that. You don't have to think about how to make your heart beat. It just does that. That's unconscious. But also there are psychological drives and motivations and experiences and memories that get repressed and processed at the unconscious level. In the conscious part of our psyche, this is our waking consciousness, where we're sitting in our heads thinking about how we want to do things or engaging with the world around us and mediating between our inner life and outer life. Now, one of the big goals of spiritual practice in my conceptualization is to harmonize the conscious and the unconscious. A lot of people live from an ego perspective that is adversarial towards the unconscious and adversarial towards the self with a capital S, which is the regulating center of the psyche. It exists below the consciousness level, and it embodies the totality of your psyche. So shadow work works at a level of excavating the unconscious for repressed material in order to metabolize it, essentially, understand it, and be able to establish a conscious relationship with it so that you can pretty much make an informed choice about what type of behavior you're going to engage in. Because a lot of our behavior, when we don't do that shadow work, is ran by unconscious or subconscious programs that exist outside of our awareness. So you might be behaving a certain way, and maybe that way is preventing you from achieving the kind of success or progress that you'd like to see in your life, or it's sabotaging your relationships or leading you to be attracted to people who really aren't a good match for you. A lot of that type of stuff kind of flags perhaps a need for some investigation into some potential unconscious drives that are pushing that behavior. And being able to establish that conscious relationship and pull it into your conscious awareness allows you to mediate those impulses and choose different behavior that's more aligned with the type of identity in life that you're trying to cultivate in your life. So that's a very interior type of work that we need to do that falls under the realm of shadow work. And then light work deals more, in my mind, it deals more with the conscious realm of the psyche, the manifestation work, regulating your mind. It can be feel-good positivity stuff, like getting a Reiki massage or something, or a Reiki attunement, energy work, sound healing, things that restore you and bring you into a state of relaxation and upliftment. Affirmation work, gratitude practice, abundance, group celebrations and ceremonies, breath work, but in a way that's oriented more towards upliftment rather than catharsis, visualization, all that positivity oriented type of work. That is important work to do because it helps you cultivate the environment that your mind creates for you to inhabit. And it also helps you cultivate material results in your life. Both of these things are necessary for bringing yourself into wholeness. So the way, in my experience, it works is like you use shadow work to descend into the unconscious. You face your inner demons. You maybe uncover and become aware of deep wounds that have existed outside of your awareness. And you bring this knowledge back into the conscious realm with you, right? The descent is like going down into the underworld, like Persephone living amongst the dead. It's not necessarily aimed at building something in the exterior world. This is about an interior journey. And once you face that darkness and are able to name it and see and feel the shape of it and kind of understand it, you're supposed to come back up. You're supposed to come back to the upper world at some point. And what do you do once you get there? That's where integration is an important and often overlooked piece of doing depth work and doing lots of shadow work and healing work, is that there's this constant excavation going on of unconscious material and constantly trying to focus on the wounds and the healing, and then the integration gets neglected. The integration piece is where light work is really supportive and important because it helps you actually metabolize the darkness. It helps you find connections with other people, find your community where, if you're carrying all this pain and burden, you need a community so that people can help you carry the load and you're not just bogged down with all this heavy introspective, reflective work all the time. These types of things are meant to be shared, not necessarily in a trauma dumping way, but I hope I'm making myself clear. Community helps you carry the heavy stuff. You might be facing down some really troublesome existential questions that you come across in your shadow work, and being able to talk about that and know how to reach out to people to talk about it and share it, it doesn't feel as heavy because they're helping you carry it and helping you work through it just to be able to talk about it. That's one aspect of light work and integration, I'd say. But there's also, maybe you're doing shadow work because you have a goal in your life and you keep coming into blockages. A really common one is relationships. A lot of people, they really want a healthy, fulfilling, romantic relationship, but they find themselves constantly attracted to the wrong people, to people who are narcissistic or abusive. Shadow work helps you figure out why that is. Maybe you had a traumatic experience in childhood, or you had unsupportive family and friends who this created a self-esteem issue. Some people get stuck at that awareness and they never move into integration, which is the part where you are like, okay, now I understand the story behind this behavior, and now I need to choose new behavior. And you might not know what that new behavior even is supposed to look like. And that's where a light worker can be really helpful, or a therapist too. I think therapists straddle both realms, but there are some therapists that I've worked with that are more of a light worker than a shadow worker. I've had to shop around many different therapists over my life, and there are definitely therapists that will help you go deep and do the shadow work, and then there are therapists that's not really their realm. They're more like a light worker. They're more working on how to reframe your thought patterns and, oh, have you tried going to the gym or something? So often a light worker or a shadow worker, they do both things, but there's one area where that makes them a shadow worker, where it's like that's just their primary orientation. But you need both in order to really have a cohesive practice that brings people into resolution with the things that they're burdened by. And again, having someone to facilitate or guide you in either area can be really important. I'd say almost especially with shadow work, because that can take you places where there is trauma, where there is profound grief or fear or rage, and you might need a therapist or somebody who is not afraid of facing down the void, essentially, who can walk you through that, because there's a big risk with getting swallowed up by the darkness and struggling to find your way back to the upper world. At the same time, once you're ready for the integration phase, it's really helpful to know somebody who is embodying the type of traits and lifestyles that you want to bring into your life, so that you can learn from them and be taught what kinds of things you can do to be like that. If all you've ever known is the life you've always lived, it's going to be really hard to think on your own, oh, when somebody treats me bad, I should just set a boundary. What does a boundary even look like to somebody who was never taught how to set boundaries? Or what does manifesting or having a desire and a dream look like to somebody who carried the belief their whole life that it was pointless for them to dream about anything because they're worthless or something, or everything's going to be bad anyways, so why bother? How do you shift away from that if you don't know what the alternative is? And then also there is energy work, massage, acupuncture. These take care of your body, your vessel. And that's a really important piece too, because a lot of emotional experience lives in our energy body or in our physical body as well. And being taken care of in that capacity is really important for grounding those experiences and helping them move through the body so that stagnation doesn't take root and you can actually have free flowing energy to work with. So I think of it like a wheel, almost like the wheel of fortune going up and down. Often healing and spiritual evolution is conceptualized like a spiral that you're working around, and you go over the same points, but you're in a vertical movement, so it's different every time. We alternate between these seasons of shadow and light. This is even seasonally symbolic. Springtime is the time where we emerge from the darkness. The sun is staying out more and more. Things are starting to bloom. People have their goals for the year. You're more active and motivated to be outside, doing things, interacting with people, gathering, just going out into the world and achieving stuff. And then we do that all through summer, and then in the autumn things start to wind down. In Chinese medicine, autumn is the season of grief. It's for letting go. It's for kind of taking inventory of how the year went and giving yourself the space to grieve the things that didn't pan out the way you wanted it to. And then we move into winter, which is the darkest time of the year, and that's the season of withdrawal. Nature is literally telling you to stay inside and kind of just look inwards and get in touch with yourself. So I would say that is the nature of depth work in general, and that light work and shadow work aren't at odds with each other. They both serve very distinct, important purposes in the whole scheme of conscious evolution and spiritual development. Now, there are pitfalls to these. I wrote an article about toxic positivity, and this really is one of the major pitfalls of light work. Is all spiritual work can be abused as a form of escapism. And with light work, this is toxic positivity manifesting as avoidance. I'm just going to focus on feeling good, or like I'm going to interpret every single roadblock or challenge that I'm having as just like some type of positivity framework, where it's like I'm just going to keep focusing on feeling good. Every single time I get stuck with something, I'm going to reframe it into how it's doing good for me, instead of actually like allowing myself to feel the negative thing, the sadness or the frustration that this experience is bringing up for me. There's a lot of people that are just like, oh, I'm just manifesting, but they're never actually like doing the work to progress. It becomes more like the ritual of feeling good about having an idea rather than the actual work of actualizing the idea. So it's a pattern of avoidance. It's the escape from things that make us uncomfortable. With light work, I think a lot of times what's uncomfortable is going inward and facing hard things. But then there's also a type of avoidance about actually doing work for an outcome that you're invested in, because that's a bit more vulnerable than doing work for an outcome that like you're not as invested in, because the potential for disappointment is much closer to your heart than otherwise. And then shadow work as escapism. This is the endless self-inquiry, seeking intensity, constantly wallowing in your trauma story, being outside of the community becomes a form of identity. I just don't belong. If you constantly look at yourself as a broken person that needs fixing, you're constantly in fixing mode and constantly in, oh, I gotta identify the source of this problem within me. And you're never actually engaging with life and putting your awareness into practice. It can become a kind of comfort zone where you just end up kind of stagnant. You're never actually progressing. You're just amassing a ton of awareness that doesn't take any action. It's very passive in nature. Now, the thing with avoidance and escapism is that it all comes down to the same thing. There is something that's just a little too uncomfortable to face, and it's all about taking a pause and getting in touch with your feelings about what's going on and asking yourself, what am I so afraid of here? What am I worried about that I'm not facing? And once that awareness comes forward, taking time to just comfort yourself and letting yourself know, hey, this is hard, and it makes total sense to feel scared about taking the next big step. And being able to hold that feeling in compassion, and then also saying, okay, so since this is how I feel, what do I need in this moment to be able to feel confident about progressing forward to the next step? You might need to gather more information about an opportunity or an idea. You might need to seek out a mentor who can teach you the skills that you feel that you're lacking to do something. And this is where light workers, shadow workers, therapists, coaches, and things like that come into play as well. So with all that being said, how do you know what type of work you need to do? Like, how do you know when you need light work done, and how do you know when you need to do some shadow work? When you feel stuck, heavy, or like something is unresolved, go to shadow work. When life feels flat or meaningless despite everything being fine on the surface, go to shadow work. When you keep attracting the same situations or relationships that are leaving you unsatisfied, do some shadow work. When you know what your patterns are, but you can't seem to shift them no matter what you try, shadow work. Whereas when you are depleted, burnt out, your nervous system is really overwhelmed, seek out a light worker. You need to have your cup poured into. You need to be restored a bit and brought back to life before you have any capacity to embark on a descent into the unconscious realm. You don't want to do that from a dysregulated or burnt out state. When you're in an active crisis or trauma response, therapist. This is not light work or shadow work issue. This is you need to go to a licensed mental health professional to be stabilized and get to a workable baseline. Light work can also be really supportive of this, like massage therapy, not specifically, like it doesn't have to be like a spiritual light worker, just in the realm of tending to yourself. Massage therapy, acupuncture, things like that are really beneficial for soothing a dysregulated nervous system and reducing stress. When you've been doing a lot of inner work and you're feeling raw or like you're destabilized, seek out a light worker, start the transition into integration, because you might be overdoing it a bit. When you have a big project that you want to bring into material reality, you want to materialize something in your life, light work is support, like manifestation work, abundance work. When you want to attract something into your life, light work. But I guess that also comes with the caveat of you want to be aware of whether there's unconscious things driving your desires, right? Because maybe you want to manifest $1 million, but what is that $1 million for? Is that to serve a purpose that is bringing you closer to your authentic, realized self? Or is this a security blanket where it's like you grew up in poverty and you don't ever want to feel impoverished ever again, so you need $1 million to feel comfort and safety? That could be a shadow work thing. And in general, just try and pay attention to what you feel like you're avoiding, right? So avoidance is a big thing that I talk about with people a lot. And avoidance, especially feeling fear or ambivalence about something, sometimes people will make it out if you don't feel a full 100% yes, then it's not for you. I push back on that because I think it's totally natural and normal to feel fear and resistance, even in the face of decisions and outcomes that would be wholly supportive and nurturing towards us in the best possible way. And that fear and that resistance is information about a lack of information or a lack of tools or skills that you might need to feel comfortable saying yes to what would be really great for you. So pay attention to what you're avoiding and get curious about it, because on the flip side, sometimes the avoidance is a true, like, this isn't aligned with me type of experience. I think that's a pretty good overview of shadow work and light work and how they function together in a kind of collaborative way. They're not really at odds with each other, but they accomplish different things in different capacities of spiritual development. So I wouldn't be a good business owner if I didn't talk about myself and the work that I do here. I mentioned before I'm a depth worker that identifies pretty strongly with shadow work. That's my bread and butter. I thought it would be helpful to just use interview questions to interview myself. So I'll just read them off one by one, basically. So the first question is, how did you come to identify as a shadow worker rather than a light worker? Part of that was just because I've always had an orientation towards shadow work. I don't know how else to say it. I've been interested in Carl Jung from a very young age. I started in middle school studying depth psychology and psychedelic experiences and the impact on perception. I experienced a lot of dysfunctional in my childhood, being raised by an alcoholic and an extremely emotionally unavailable mother. In order to materialize the kind of life that I want for myself, I had to face a lot of really hard things about myself, and it's just my temperament to look deeper and dive into things and try and get to the root of things. I've always been self-analytical. I've always wondered, why do I behave like this? What is driving this? I've always had that curiosity from a very young age. And I always had a strong affinity for the dark goddesses before I even began identifying as a pagan. My favorite myths as a teenager were the myths of Persephone, of Psyche and Eros, of Kali Ma. I thought she was so cool when I was a teenager. And then later on, as I started my spiritual practice and began engaging in pagan rituals, I became more acquainted with the Morrigan, as well as Hecate, Shiva. So a lot of the deities that I work with work in that shadow realm capacity. And then eventually I started actually doing tarot and astrology readings and learning about my channeling gifts. And when I started doing readings for people, it always went straight to the deepest stuff with people. I have no control over it. The information that wants to come out when I work with people is that deep shadow material. I go straight for the inner child stuff, the experiences that have been in your history that are driving your present reality. I think that the way I guide people through that is I like to advertise that I am a compassionate depth worker, because a lot of people are used to hearing, oh, this is going to be a brutally honest reading or something like that. I'm very honest and truthful with people, but there's no reason it has to be brutal. The whole goal of shadow work is to cultivate self-compassion. So if I can't deliver the truth to you in a way that leaves you feeling comforted and capable of facing it, then I'm not doing a good job. So the next question is, what does a session with you actually look like? This is a good example. You're going to sit with me if we're doing a tarot reading or an astrology reading, and I'm going to introduce myself to you, do a little bit of small talk, and then I'm going to set the intention to only receive information that you are ready to hear in the way that you're ready to hear it. And so everything that comes out is you're at a place where you can handle it. It's nothing that's ever going to be too much or too scary. There might be tears, there might be a big emotional release, and I meet that with compassionate witnessing and validation. This is where my human services background comes into play. I have my bachelor's in human services, and I worked for 10 years in disability services and case management, working with adults with developmental disabilities. It's just always been in my nature to be professional and informed in regards to mental health and trauma experiences for people. A lot of my clients that I worked with in disability services had traumatic histories. Many of them were raised in group homes and foster care, and abuse is extremely common among that population. It's incredibly sad. So being able to sit with somebody and guide them through some tough behavioral challenges that come up is an important skill in the work that I used to do. And that's a skill that I bring to the work that I'm doing with people today. How do you hold space for someone going into difficult material? I gauge their awareness. First of all, I'm not going to hit them with something super blunt, right? If they don't seem ready to hear it like that. So I gauge it case by case. Some people, there's something very intense coming through, but I can tell that they're just not ready to hear it quite so plainly. And so I might make a suggestion like, hey, this is pointing to some type of experience that could look like this. A really common one I get is in astrology readings, people get a moon in Capricorn, right? And moon in Capricorn people, the moon has fallen in Capricorn. Your mother was not emotionally available if you have a moon in Capricorn. You did not feel safe being vulnerable for one reason or another because you didn't get the experience of being safely held in a vulnerable state. There are lots of reasons why a mother could be emotionally unavailable. It's not automatically abuse or neglect. a lot of the time, people with moon in Capricorn had a mother that might have been a single mother and was incredibly responsible for a lot of things and holding a lot of responsibilities that took them away from being more available to their children. There was nothing malicious or neglectful about it. It was just a circumstance of life. Then there are also lots of other times where it was emotional neglect, that they had a mother that just, for one reason or another, abandoned their responsibility to create emotional intimacy with their child. So the fact that these things exist on a spectrum, it's important to be mindful that, one, I'm not omniscient, so I never get the precise facts, especially when I'm channeling tarot. Astrology is where I can get a lot more precise because of the placement of the planets and what they're specifically telling me. But I can get the shape of the wound and the impact that it's having. And that's the most important thing, that people will be able to relate to that more so than trying to predict exactly what happened. If you can name the actual experience and what the outcome was, that's a lot more beneficial anyways. There's no need to constantly rehash trauma. There are times though where trauma does come through very clearly, and I just deliver it in a very compassionate way. I can feel the pain that you went through, and I can name that for you. And if at all they start to exhibit signs of being extremely triggered or dysregulated, I will walk them through some breathing exercises to get grounded, and then I will often refer out to therapists to handle that material with them, because I'm not a mental health professional and I don't want to operate outside of the scope of my practice and cause harm to people. So I'm always ready to refer out when somebody is clearly in need of therapy in a way that I am not authorized or qualified to give. And I guess that leads into this other question: how is working with you different from therapy? The difference is that usually we don't have an ongoing relationship. Most of my clients I only see once and then never again. I'm okay with that. I'm also okay with having recurring clients, but this is not like an ongoing therapeutic relationship where you come and see me every single week and I hold all of your most challenging emotions for you in the space. I'm just not able to make myself available in that way personally, but also qualification-wise, that's not what I've trained to do. I don't diagnose mental illness or mental health conditions. I might say something like, what I'm picking up on feels like it could be this or that, but I can't diagnose you. I can just tell based on what I'm intuitively picking up on that this might be a direction you want to check out, and I can give you a referral. The information that can come out of my readings sometimes it's like a short-term intervention. Yeah, intervention work is maybe a better way to phrase it, especially with the context of my background in human services. When you're working in case management, often your goal isn't to provide therapy for somebody. It's to provide intervention. This is like coordinating resources, pointing you in the right direction, and giving you a very precise and concise insight into your situation that helps you know what you're dealing with so you can make an informed decision about how you want to proceed. Whereas if you're like just fumbling around without any clarity about what's going on, you get kind of lost and you might not have a clear idea of what you want or need to do to address your situation. So my work is really about introducing clarity and helping you feel capable of addressing your life. What's the hardest part of being a shadow worker? I don't know. What is the hardest part? I don't think it's very hard for me, actually. When I got out of human services and stepped into what I'm doing now, this is like inhabiting my natural skin. Whereas before I had to wear a mask and fit in a certain role that I wasn't quite happy with. This is just me being me. I get to show up as I am, being a shadow worker, and I really find that liberating. I think the hardest part about being a shadow worker is more about the hardest part about being an intuitive professional. So it's neither light or shadow work. It's that sometimes the information that comes through is so difficult to take seriously. Like, how can this possibly make sense? Or it's something that feels too almost audacious to say to somebody. Oh, I can tell your marriage is on the rocks. I don't like delivering information that I can't verify very easily, especially when it concerns third parties. So that's the hardest thing. I don't like delivering information about third party people, but it comes through, and I've learned that I have to start allowing that into my practice because it's coming through for a reason. What does a breakthrough moment look like in my work? That is when somebody feels completely at ease because the reality that I have named for them is their lived reality. They feel seen, they feel totally understood, and they are having their experience articulated in a way that they are able to comprehend and take a great deal of meaning away from. So they achieve clarity and they feel confident about what they need to do to move themselves forward on their path. I don't give people answers. I give people clarity so that they know what they need to do next. That comes from them. I'm all about orienting people back to their sovereign agency to be accountable to their own healing and to have the knowledge and expertise on what they need, right? Because we're all our own special little plant and we all have our own different ways of unfolding and growing that come from within us. I can't give that to you, but I can help you reconnect with the part of you that knows all of that about you. How do I take care of myself doing this kind of work? I set really good boundaries. I learned this in my human services work. I don't work longer than I want to. I set end times. I have time limits on my readings, and I am really good at making sure we don't go over time and that I'm not having my time monopolized. I have a regular self-care practice and I rest when I need it. I seek therapy when I need it. I've gotten really good at regulating myself and taking care of my needs, and that's what I need to take care of myself. Do I ever do light work, or is it always shadow focused? I guess I work with Cacao. I do Cacao ceremonies with people, but these ceremonies, while they are heart-opening in nature, they are about kind of meeting yourself internally and reconnecting, and it's an integration, but I wouldn't call it necessarily light work either. So I don't know. I don't think I really do light work. Manifestation, energy work, feel good stuff. I don't do a lot of that. I'm more like the person that I do it in my personal life. I get it done for myself. But as a practitioner, I think that my work is nearly always shadow focused. Light parts come into play occasionally, especially if somebody needs like career consultation. That's a common one with astrology. One of my previous jobs was being essentially a career counselor for people. So sometimes that comes in. But yeah, no, most of the work that I do, I would say 99.9999% of the work that I do for people is teaching people how to do their inner work and to do it in a way that leaves them feeling safe and comfortable. Who is my ideal client? Who is this work for and who is it not for? This work is for people who are ready to face the stuff. They're not trying to patch up or avoid things, right? They want to take charge of their healing process. They want to be an active participant in it. And also they're not trying to live in denial. Or if they are currently in denial, they are open to being reoriented away from denial, right? We all go through denial sometimes. Who is this work not for? It's not for somebody who's just trying to prove or test whether psychics are real. I get some of those people. It's not for somebody who... Sometimes I get people that want me to do readings on their children or something like, oh, is my son going to have a happy life? Or is my ex thinking about me? What is my ex doing? I don't do that. I don't read drama like that. My readings are for people who are ready to do internal work on themselves and are ready to take ownership of that process, which I find a lot of people fit that category. It's nice. What tools do I use and why? My main tools are tarot and Vedic astrology. And then I'm also using Cacao, doing Cacao ceremonies. So I'll start one by one. Why do I use tarot? Because I learned how to read tarot, and because the tarot represents archetypes in the psyche. It's very compatible with Jungian psychology. If you know anything about Carl Jung, he had a fascination with the tarot. And it works for me. It's like reading comic strips to me. It's just a very compatible tool for channeling intuitive information about people. I find that also that I wouldn't need tarot. I don't technically need tarot to channel the information for people, but it feels good and convincing for both me and the person for there to be some cards involved. Vedic astrology. Why do I use this tool? Because it's one of the most spiritually fulfilling and satisfying practices I have uncovered in my life and learned. I love the whole cosmology of Hinduism, and it's so robust. I get a great deal of healing from Vedic astrology and Hindu myths and everything. It's a balm, and I find that it helps people make sense of why things are the way they are in their life in a way that helps them take it less personally and understand that they're living in an environment where there are different energy signatures showing up in their life, and they get to choose how they respond to those things. Being able to name those signatures through the astrology, it gives you a clearer understanding of how to think about different things that you experience. I describe that as mapping the karmic architecture of your life. And then cacao. I like cacao because it is a grounded plant medicine. It is not mind-altering in the way that psychedelics are. I have a rich background in having personally experienced psychedelics, and they're incredibly powerful tools that deserve a lot of respect and admiration. And at the same time, I think that they tend to be overused and overprescribed and kind of overpromised on what they can deliver to people. It gets kind of back into that situation with the escapism. A lot of people use psychedelics as a way of escaping actually having to do the work in their life. They get addicted to the experience of spiritual bliss that they have in these peak experiences on LSD and shrooms and whatnot, and they get stuck there. They just keep going back to the experience instead of taking the revelations that they have and integrating it into their life. And I find that cacao is really helpful for bringing someone into a state of being able to integrate. You're fully conscious and aware during the whole experience, and you learn that you can take that experience that you had on a more intense hallucinogen. It's like the blueprint of that experience of being able to reach into your unconscious and pull out awareness and meet knowledge of yourself in that experience. You can have that in a cacao experience with a guided journey. And you could just have that in guided hypnosis generally. It's just important to kind of understand what it's accomplishing for you and what is the point of it, right? Having some type of intention or framework for how you're going to approach these experiences. So I like using Cacao for the heart opening experience, because being able to connect with your heart space is really important for being able to access your depths and be able to meet them with compassion rather than reactivity. Being able to see the things inside you that you would otherwise think are very scary or that need to be avoided and gotten rid of. Cacao helps you see it in a way that's more compassionate. You see the pain underneath your shadow parts experience. You see how they're essentially a part of you that just wants your validation and recognition, right? So you're able to see them on that heart level. And that's really important for being able to actually make lasting, enduring changes in your psyche and your life patterns in a way that's restorative and healing, rather than just indulgent navel gazing. So I think that wraps up how I am as a professional shadow worker, depth worker, and the capacity that I work in. And maybe in the future I'd be able to find one of my light worker friends to come on and kind of interview them in the same vein. Until then, I'm wrapping it up here, and I'm going to say thank you for listening and making it to the end, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care.
Thank you for listening to Moon Lodge Mingle. If you found this valuable, please consider sharing it with a friend who might need it. You can find more content through my blog and newsletter at moonlodgemystic.com. If you're interested in a tarot or Vedic astrology reading, or you'd like to work one-on-one in a personalized cacao journey, you can book through my website. Until next time, take care.